Hey everybody! Tonight we embark on a journey deep into the heart of Central Africa, to a kingdom whose riches were not just measured in gold or ivory, but in threads spun from the very leaves of the forest. Imagine the air, thick and damp, clinging to your skin like a second layer. Sunlight struggles to pierce the dense canopy above, dappling the forest floor in an ever-shifting mosaic of light and shadow. The air hums with the chorus of unseen insects, the distant call of a bird, the rustle of something, hopefully friendly, in the undergrowth. This isn't your average air-conditioned museum tour. If you were actually here in, say, the 14th century, you probably wouldn't survive this without a serious appreciation for local knowledge and maybe a good anti-venom kit. Just saying. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to see where you're all tuning in from, and it is in your corner of the world, so drop a comment below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the edge of an immense, sprawling forest, a verdant ocean stretching as far as your eyes can perceive. This is the basin of the mighty Nadi River, the Great Water, later known as the Kongo. The air here is warm, heavy with the scent of damp earth, blooming orchids you can't quite name, and the subtle, almost electric tingle of an approaching rain shower. Listen closely, and beneath the ever-present hum of cicadas and the croaking of frogs, you can hear the lifeblood of this land, water. It drips from broad leaves, gurgles in hidden streams, and flows powerfully in the great river that serves as the central artery of this world. You trudge forward, the undergrowth surprisingly yielding in places, your feet sinking slightly into the rich, loamy soil. Giant trees, their trunks thicker than any you've likely seen, soar upwards, their highest branches forming a cathedral ceiling that filters the equatorial sun into a soft greenish glow. And it's here, often nestled in the swampier, more waterlogged parts of this environment, near the riverbanks and in the riverbanks, marshy clearings, that you encounter it. The raffia palm. It's not just one palm, but a whole family of them, Raffia fariniferae or Raffia Textiles perhaps, standing proud and somewhat shaggy, like botanical giants wearing loosely fitted coats. Their fronds are enormous, some of the largest leaves in the plant kingdom, arching gracefully outwards and upwards, sometimes reaching lengths of 20, even 25 meters. Imagine a leaf longer than a city bus. It's quite the spectacle. These aren't the elegant, slender palms of desert oases. These are robust, utilitarian beings, perfectly adapted to their water-rich home. Their very presence seems to whisper of potential, of resources waiting to be understood and utilized. You reach out and touch one of the fallen fronds. The surface is a little rough, but the structure is clearly immensely strong, yet surprisingly light. The people who share this forest with the raffia palm, the ancestors of the Kongo kingdom, would have lived alongside these remarkable plants for generations, millennia even. You can picture them observing, experimenting. Perhaps a child idly peels at a fallen leaflet, revealing the strong, fibrous strands within, or might be a hunter, needing a quick cord to bind a catch, strips a piece from a frond, and realizes its surprising tensile strength. It's in these simple, everyday interactions that great discoveries are often made, long before they become codified traditions, before they get all fancy with their haute couture loincloths. The formal establishment of the Kongo kingdom, a mainstream historical fact that echoes through the centuries, is traditionally dated to the late 14th century, around 1390 AD. A charismatic and visionary leader named Lukni Luanimi is credited with unifying several disparate key Kongo-speaking chieftaincies into a more centralized state. He established his capital at Bambanza, Kongo, a city strategically located on a fertile plateau, well defended and ripe for growth. This nascent kingdom didn't just spring from a political vacuum. It grew out of this very environment you're now imagining, an environment rich in resources, from wild game and arable land to minerals and, crucially, an abundance of plants like our friend, the raffia palm. Historians still argue whether the Kongo kingdom's initial expansion was primarily fueled by sophisticated agricultural practices that created surpluses, or by its strategy cc control over vital resources like salt, copper, and, yes, the versatile raffia palm, which would soon become a cornerstone of its internal and external trade. It's likely a complex interplay of all these factors, but the humble raffia was destined to play a role far exceeding its botanical station. It wasn't just going to be a tree in the forest. It was going to be woven into the very fabric of Kongo identity, its threads forming the basis of clothing, currency, social stratification, art, and even spiritual communication. And here's a quirky little tidbit for you. The raffia palm wasn't just a future textile mill in plant form. The Kongo people, resourceful as they were, discovered that the sap of certain raffia species could be tapped and fermented into a rather potent palm wine. You can almost picture the village elders, after a long day of, well, eldering, enjoying a calabash of this brew, the conversations flowing as freely as the wine itself. Some say it's an acquired taste, sweet at first, then quickly gaining a vinegary kick, but it certainly would have been a part of community life, fueling celebrations, solemn rituals, or just a good old get-together. It might even explain some of the more abstract, early weaving patterns that would eventually emerge. Just kidding. Mostly, beyond the wine, the tough midribs of the fronds made for basic construction materials, and the unopened fronds, the heart of the palm, were a food source. It had a purpose. As you stand there, amidst the towering trees and the rustling raffia, you can feel the nascent energy of a society on the cusp of defining itself. The raffia palm, in its quiet, unassuming way, holds within its fibrous leaves the potential for intricate beauty, for economic power, for a language expressed in pattern and texture. The relationship between the Kongo people and this plant is about to become one of deep intimacy and ingenuity, the journey of transforming these raw green fronds into symbols of a kingdom has only just begun, whispered on the humid breeze, carrying the scent of rain and the promise of civilization. The first strands are being pulled, quite literally, from the heart of the forest, and with them, the story of a unique artistic and cultural heritage starts to unfold. So, these first strands are being pulled. But how exactly does a monstrously large, somewhat unwieldy palm frond, like those you saw arching towards the forest cathedral ceiling, transform into something fine enough, pliable enough, to be woven into cloth? It's not magic, though the transformation is so complete, it might as well be. It's a testament to human ingenuity, patience, and an intimate understanding of the materials provided by nature. You're about to meet the skilled hands, the original innovators, who coaxed thread from leaf. Imagine you're now shadowing one of the early Kongo artisans. The first step is harvesting. This isn't a casual stroll in the park to pick a few daisies. Young, unopened fronds are often preferred for the finest, most supple fibers. The harvester, likely a strong young man, would venture into those swampy areas where the raffia palms thrive, armed perhaps with a sharp stone tool, or, as time progressed, an iron machete. The Kongo people were, after all, skilled metallurgists, a fact that often surprises those who only know them for their textiles. This skill with metal undoubtedly improved tools for all sorts of tasks, including this one. Selecting the right frond is key, too old, and is key, too old. The fibers are brittle, too young, and they lack strength. You wouldn't want to accidentally harvest the one the local chieftain had mentally bookmarked for his new sun hat. Either sustainable harvesting would also have been crucial, ensuring the continued abundance of this vital resource once the chosen fronds are cut, a task involving some serious muscle, given their size and the often challenging terrain. They are carried back to the village or a dedicated processing area. Now the meticulous work begins. Each giant frond is composed of numerous long leaflets. The artisan takes a leaflet and, with practiced ease, separates the waxy outer cuticle and the green fleshy part from the pale, inner fibrous layer on the underside. This is often done by hand or with a simple scraper, perhaps a sharpened mussel shell or a sliver of bamboo. It's a repetitive, focused task, stripping away the unnecessary to reveal the treasure within. You can hear the soft tearing sound, rhythmic and hypnotic, as leaf after leaf yields its fibrous heart. These freshly stripped fibers, still damp and smelling faintly of green vegetation, are then laid out to dry. They are spread carefully in the sun, perhaps on woven mats or on the cleared earth, sometimes hung over branches. The equatorial sun, so intense just a short while ago as it filtered through the canopy, now becomes an ally, bleaching the fibers from a pale green or yellowish hue to a creamy white or light beige. They shrink slightly, tighten, and become stronger as the moisture evaporates. You can almost feel the warmth radiating from them. Hear the faint rustle as a light breeze passes over the drying bed. This drying process could take several days, depending on the weather, and keen eyes would watch for signs of mildew or uneven drying. But even after drying, the raffia fibers can be a bit stiff, a little too eager to remind you of their woody origins. To achieve the suppleness needed for weaving, further treatment is often required. Sometimes this involves a light retting, a controlled soaking that allows natural bacteria to break down some of the remaining pectins and lignins that cause stiffness, though this requires careful timing to avoid weakening the fibers. More commonly, the dried strands are gently beaten with a wooden mallet or scraped again to increase their flexibility. Then comes the crucial step of splitting them into finer filaments. A single harvested fiber, even after drying, might be too coarse for delicate work, so using a sharp thumbnail, a fishbone, or a small, pointed tool, the artisan meticulously splits these strands longitudinally into thinner, more thread-like elements. Thickness depends entirely on the intended product. Coarser strands for robust mats and baskets, and incredibly fine, hair-like filaments for the most delicate and prestigious cloths. It's painstaking work, requiring a steady hand and immense patience, turning tough, leafy bits into something you would actually want next to your skin, which, let's be honest, is a minor miracle of ancient R&D. Archaeologists and anthropologists still debate the exact timeline and complexity of early Kongo weaving, particularly whether plain utilitarian weaves developed concurrently with, or significantly preceded, the emergence of patterned decorative textiles. It's likely that the earliest uses of these processed fibers were for purely functional items: strong cordage for hunting nets and fishing lines, durable baskets for carrying goods, and coarse, loosely woven mats for sleeping or sitting. These items would have been essential for daily life, the bedrock upon which more elaborate textile traditions could be built. The techniques learned in making a sturdy basket or a functional net would have paved the way for the finer art of cloth weaving. The individuals performing these tasks, these first fiber artists, were laying the groundwork for a defining feature of Kongo culture. Who were they? In many societies, specific crafts are gendered, and while later Kongo weaving involved distinct roles for men and women, which we'll explore in good time, The initial processing of raw materials like raffia might have been a more communal or less strictly defined activity. Perhaps it was women, often the gatherers and processors of plant materials in many cultures, who first mastered these techniques, or perhaps it was men during lulls in hunting or clearing land. What's certain is that these were people with an incredible sensitivity to their environment and its offerings. Their tools were simple hands, basic cutting and scraping implements, perhaps a rudimentary frame for stretching fibers, but their knowledge was profound. These weren't your Instagram-ready craft workshops, but the results were arguably more essential for survival than a perfectly curated feed. The status of these early fiber workers in their communities is something we can infer. Initially, providing essential goods like ropes and basket would have been a valuable contribution, respected for its utility. As techniques refined and the products became more than just functional, perhaps a particularly well-made mat or a basket with a hint of decorative striping, the skill itself would have garnered more admiration. This wasn't just labor. It was an art form in its infancy, a technology that transformed a common plant into a cornerstone of daily existence and, eventually, a symbol of societal sophistication. Some oral traditions, those whispers from the past that carry cultural memory, hint that weavers or fiber processors would observe small rituals or hold certain beliefs relate to their craft. Instance, it's sometimes said that they would avoid processing raffia on days of ill omen or during specific phases of the moon, believing that the spiritual state of the moment could be woven into the fibers themselves, affecting the final products themselves, quality, or even its luck. Whether these were widespread or localized beliefs, they underscore the deep connection between the material, the maker, and the worldview of the early Kongo people. Each strand prepared was not just a physical object, but a carrier of intent, skill, and the subtle energies of its creation. The whispers of the palm were beginning to speak through human hands. The whispers of the palm, speaking through those increasingly skilled human hands you met, began to change their tune. What started as a practical dialogue about shelter, containment, and basic coverings slowly evolved into a more complex oration on beauty, status, and power. The journey from a simple, functional raffia cord to the intricate textiles that would drape Kongo royalty is a story of burgeoning artistry and societal definition. You're now witnessing how those meticulously prepared fibers, once destined for humble mats or sturdy basket, start to climb the social ladder, becoming the very fabric of kinship. Imagine the scene. The weaving process itself is becoming more refined. While basic mats and baskets might still be made with simpler technique, the creation of actual cloth, rilaboni or rimutuzu, demands greater precision. The single-heddle round loom, a common feature in this part of Africa for producing raffia textiles, enters the picture more prominently. Typically, it's the men who operate these looms, transforming the prepared raffia strands, often supplied by women who have done the painstaking work of harvesting, stripping, drying, and splitting into lengths of fabric. You see a weaver, perhaps sitting on the ground, his legs extended beneath the horizontal loom, his fingers, nimble and sure, fly back and forth, interlacing the warp and weft threads, the rhythmic clack and thud of the beater, pressing each new row into a tight, even fabric. It's a slow, meditative process. A single piece of high-quality cloth could take weeks, even months, of dedicated labor. This investment of time and skill inherently makes the resulting textile valuable. Not everyone has the weeks to spare, nor the cultivated expertise to produce the finest weaves. Suddenly, a piece of raffia cloth, just a piece of raffia cloth? Its texture, its fineness, the evenness of its weave. These qualities begin to speak. Loosely woven piece might be everyday wear for a common farmer or fisherman, but a textile that feels almost like silk to your touch, one so densely woven it's nearly waterproof, or one featuring subtle, intentionally varied textures, that's a different story. That's a statement. This is where Raffia starts to draw lines in the sand, or rather, threads in the societal fabric. Access to these superior textiles becomes a marker of distinction. Chieftains, successful traders, spiritual leaders, and their families begin to accumulate and display these finer cloths. It's not just about keeping the rain off anymore. It's about showcasing your standing, your wealth, your ability to command the labor and artistry required to produce such items. You couldn't just show up to an important village council or a royal audience in your everyday, run-of-the-mill loincloth. That would be like wearing flip-flops to a state dinner. Highly inadvisable, and a clear inadvisable sign you weren't quite in the loop. At the apex of this evolving hierarchy is the Mani Kongo, the king, and the royal court at Banza, Kongo. Here, Raffia Textiles transform into dazzling symbols of power and divine authority. Kingdom, as you know, had a sophisticated political structure with the Mani Kongo at its head, supported by a council of nobles, provincial governors, and a network of officials. This intricate system of governance needed its visual language, and Raffia provided a rich vocabulary. The king and high-ranking nobles would be adorned in the most luxurious raffia garments, often of immense size and exquisite quality. We're talking about vast swaths of fabric, intricately pleated and draped, sometimes dyed in rich blacks, reds, and yellows, using natural pigments. Some of these cloths achieved a texture often described by early European visitors as being like velvet or plush. These were the pile cloths, where thousands of tiny raffia fibers were individually looped and cut to create a soft, dense surface. Imagine the sheer labor involved. These weren't just status symbols. They were also probably quite comfortable, assuming you weren't the one who had to spend 6 months weaving a single square foot of the stuff. The king might wear robes of this Kongo velvet, or sit upon cushions and mats made from it, visually and tangibly separating him from ordinary mortals. His regalia, his symbols of office, like special caps, sashes, or intricately woven baskets holding sacred items, were often fashioned from or adorned with the finest raffia. These items weren't just pretty. They were imbued with the authority of the state and the sacredness of the kingship. Historians still argue whether the intricate sumptuary regulations governing raffia attire in the Kongo kingdom were explicitly codified laws imposed from the top down, or if they evolved more organically as powerful individuals and lineages sought to visually differentiate themselves through the conspicuous consumption of luxury textiles. It was likely a bit of both, a natural tendency for elites to distinguish themselves, later reinforced by customs and expectations that effectively functioned like laws. Certain patterns, certain qualities of cloth, certain ways of wearing them became exclusive to specific ranks or occasions, giving a new meaning to power dressing, where your outfit could literally tell people how many villages bowed to your authority, or at least how good your weaver was. The tribute system also played a role. Provincial governors and subordinate chiefs were required to send tribute to the Mani Kongo, and this often included substantial quantities of raffia cloth, especially the high-quality varieties. This concentrated the finest textiles at the capital, further enhancing the splendor of the royal court and ensuring that the king had a ready supply of this valuable commodity for gifting, for ceremonial use, and for trade. The royal treasury wasn't just about metals or ivory. It was also, in a very real sense, a storehouse of woven wealth. And for a quirky, perhaps slightly more esoteric tidbit, It's whispered in some accounts and oral traditions that certain raffia items associated with royalty were believed to possess protective or empowering qualities. For example, the personal sleeping mat of the Mani Kongo wasn't just any old mat. Some sources suggest it might have been rewoven with fresh, specially consecrated raffia fibers at regular intervals, perhaps each lunar cycle. This practice would serve not only to maintain its physical quality, but also to ensure its ritual purity, protecting the king's rest and his royal dreams from any, unscheduled nightmares or malevolent spiritual interference. The pressure on the royal mat weaver. No pressure, just weave the king a good night's sleep every month. So, you see, these threads, once humble, now bear the weight of governance, of social order, of royal mystique. The fineness of the weave, the softness of the pile, the richness of the dye. All these elements contribute to a visual and tactile language of power. The raffia palm, that generous gift of the Congo's verdant cradle, is no longer just a plant. Its fibers are being transformed by those skilled hands into very symbols that hold the kingdom together, demonstrating that true wealth and authority can be cultivated, woven, and worn with an elegance that speaks volumes without uttering a single word. The journey from forest floor to royal court is complete, and Raffia's role in society is becoming ever more intricate. So, you've seen how these once humble raffia fibers have been elevated, quite literally, to the shoulders of kings and the adornment of courts. The plain, utilitarian weave has given way, in the upper echelons of Kongo society, to fabrics of Kongo society. Astonishing softness and density, like that Kongo velvet we touched upon, cloths that whisper luxury with every rustle. But the story doesn't end with texture and status. These textiles are about to reveal another layer of their complexity, a layer that speaks not just of wealth or power, but of knowledge, identity, and a silent woven language. You're about to learn that these patterns and designs are far more than just pretty decorations. They are, in a very real sense, hieroglyphs woven into the very soul of the cloth. Imagine you're now closely examining one of these finer raffia textiles, perhaps a large display panel or an elaborate chiefly garment. Your eyes trace the intricate lines, the repeating shapes, the subtle shifts in color where different naturally dyed fibers have been introduced. At first, it might seem like a pleasing, if complex, geometric arrangement, but look closer. Listen with your eyes. The Kongo people, like many cultures rich in oral tradition, developed sophisticated ways to record and transmit information visually, and their textiles were a prime medium for this. Every knot, every line, every block of pattern wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was often a carrier of meaning, a symbol that could be read by those initiated into its vocabulary. It's like a secret code, but instead of needing a decoder ring, you needed your grandma, or perhaps a wise elder, to explain what that particular zigzag next to that slightly bumpy square really meant. And heaven help you if you accidentally were the aggressive crocodile, seeking new territory pattern to a peace negotiation with a neighboring village. Awkward. You'll notice a prevalence of geometric motifs, diamonds, lozenges, chevrons, intricate interlace patterns that loop and weave like the forest vines themselves. Spirals, checkerboards, and complex grids, these are the building blocks of the Kongo woven lexicon. These weren't chosen at random. Each shape and its arrangement in relation to others could signify a host of concepts. A lozenge, for instance, is a very common motif across many Central African artistic traditions, often linked to femininity, fertility, or life itself. depending on its internal divisions or surrounding elements. It might specify a particular lineage, a social group, or even a stage of life. Interlacing patterns, those beautiful knots that seem to have no beginning and no end, frequently spoke of interconnectedness, the bonds of family, the unity of the community, of life, or even the complex relationship between the human world and the spirit world. Beyond the purely geometric, you might also discern abstract representations of the natural world. A series of undulating lines could represent the great Nanzadi River, the source of life and a powerful spiritual entity. Certain arrangements of triangles or chevrons might evoke the scales of a snake or a crocodile, creatures of immense symbolic power, often associated with wisdom, danger, and transformation. Stylized representations of birds, tortoises, or even certain insects could appear, each carrying its own bundle of proverbs, cautionary tales, or desirable attributes. Think of it as the original emoji system, just way more labor-intensive, and definitely not something you could just tap out on a screen while half asleep. Each textile became a miniature narrative, a condensed piece of cultural wisdom, a mainstream historical fact that underscores this cultural emphasis on visual communication is that the Kongo people, along with many neighboring groups, also practiced elaborate scarification and body painting. Symbolic patterns etched onto skin or painted onto bodies for rituals and special occasions often shared a common design language with those found in their textiles, basketry, and wood carvings. This created a kind of holistic visual environment where important social and cosmological messages were constantly reinforced, worn directly on the body and on the garments that clothed it. The patterns on your skin might declare your lineage, while the patterns on your raffia skirt might tell a proverb pertinent to the day's activities or the ceremony you were attending. Art historians and anthropologists specializing in Kongo textiles still argue whether the abstract geometric patterns found on most raffia cloths were primarily aesthetic choices driven by the technical constraints and possibilities of weaving. The way threads naturally cross at right angles, lending themselves to angular designs, or if every line and angle held a precise, translatable symbolic meaning within a universally understood Kongo semiotic system. The truth, as is often the case with such ancient and nuanced traditions, probably lies somewhere in between. Some elements likely had very specific, widely understood meanings, while others' good meanings might have been more open to interpretation, their significance shifting with context, or perhaps some were indeed chosen for their sheer visual appeal by a weaver with a particularly artistic eye. It's a complex tapestry of intention and artistry. Now for a quirky, slightly more mysterious tidbit. Some anecdotal accounts from early European travelers, those who ventured into the Kongo kingdom from the late 15th century onwards, mentioned the existence of talking cloths. These somewhat fragmented reports, a particularly knowledgeable elder or a specially trained orator could supposedly take a complex, richly patterned textile and read from it the history of a clan, the deeds of a famous ancestor, or a series of famous ancestor, important moral lessons. It wasn't necessarily a literal reading like you'd read a book, but rather the patterns served as powerful mnemonic cues, unlocking vast stores of memorized information. Imagine a textile acting as a kind of visual prompt sheet for an epic oral performance. Whether this was a highly developed symbolic interpretation or a more direct form of information encoding is, of course, up for a very sleepy debate as you drift off. Understanding this visual language was crucial for navigating Kongo society. The patterns you wore could signal your identity, your social standing, your marital status, your clan, even your mood or intentions. If you chose your outfit carefully, misinterpreting a pattern at a royal feast or a significant ceremony could be a serious faux pas, potentially earning you the ancient Kongo equivalent of an unfriend request, which might have been delivered with a rather more pointed social snub than you'd experience online today. The threads truly did talk, and being literate in their language was a key aspect of social intelligence. So, as you gaze at these patterned surfaces, let your mind wander. See beyond the mere geometry. Try to feel the stories, the proverbs, the ancestral knowledge embedded in each precisely placed fiber. These are not just decorations. They are distillations of a worldview, a library woven from raffia, where the whispers of the palm have learned to articulate the deepest values and complex social dynamics of an entire kingdom. The skill of the weaver becomes not just technical mastery, but the art of embedding meaning, transforming simple threads into a vibrant, communicative tapestry. You've seen how those raffia threads, once merely functional, became statements of power and carriers of intricate woven hieroglyphs. Now, prepare to witness how these textiles become deeply entwined with the very rhythm of Kongo life, accompanying individuals on their journey from the first breath to the final farewell. Raffia isn't just for kings or for silent communication. It's a constant companion, marking every significant passage, every rite of passage, every celebration, and every sorrow. It's the literal thread that weaves through the rich tapestry of existence in the Kongo kingdom. Imagine the arrival of a new life. A baby is born, and one of the first materials to touch its delicate skin is likely a piece of soft, well-worn raffia cloth, perhaps not the superfine Kongo velvet prestige pieces, as newborns are probably less impressed by the intricate weave than by its absorbency. But hey, art is often lost on the very young. Still, a mother might use a specially prepared, softened raffia textile to swaddle her infant, or as a comfortable sling to keep the baby close as she goes about her day. Sometimes, small, protective amulets or specific patterns, those woven hieroglyphs we talked about, might be incorporated into these baby carriers or tiny garments, silent prayers for health, strength, and a fortunate life, woven by the skilled hands of a loving relative. Then, as a child grows, they reach the pivotal stage of initiation. These rites, varying in form across the vast Kongo domain, mark the often arduous transition from childhood to adulthood, a period of seclusion, learning and testing. Learning and testing might wear specific garments made of raffia, sometimes rougher, plainer cloth to signify their liminal state, or perhaps costumes and masks intricately constructed from dyed and woven raffia fibers for ceremonial dances. These aren't just clothes, they are transformative attire. The patterns woven into them, or the very form of the mask, could symbolize the secret knowledge being imparted, the new responsibilities being undertaken, or the ancestral spirits presiding over the transition. You can almost feel the charged atmosphere, the rhythmic drumming, the young initiates adorned in these symbolic threads, stepping across the threshold into their new roles in society. And what about love and partnership? When it comes time for marriage, raffia textiles often feature prominently. Imagine the negotiations, the joining of two families. Significant quantities of raffia cloth, especially the finer, patterned varieties, would frequently form a vital part of the bride wealth exchanged between the families. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It represented real economic value, a transfer of the accumulated labor and artistry embodied in the textiles. It seems even in the 15th century Kongo, you couldn't escape the social obligation of bringing a decent gift to a wedding, and a finely woven raffia piece was the Kongo equivalent of that really nice crystal vase everyone covets. The bride and groom themselves might be adorned in special. Raffia attire for the ceremony, perhaps dyed in auspicious colors, with patterns speaking of fertility, prosperity, and the harmonious joining of two lineages. These weren't just wedding outfits. They were visual testaments to the new social unit being formed, woven declarations of hope for the future. Imagine the wedding registry. We're registered for 10 prestige raffia cloths, a goat, and please, no more blenders. I mean, grinding stones. But life, as we all know, also involves endings. And in the Kongo kingdom, funerary practices were deeply significant, reflecting a profound respect for the deceased and a strong belief in the afterlife and the continuing influence of ancestors. This is where Raffia Textiles often played their most visually stunning and voluminous role. A mainstream historical fact is that the funerary practices for Kongo elites were particularly elaborate. The deceased would be carefully prepared and then wrapped in layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. Raffia cloth. We are not talking about a single shroud here. We mean dozens, sometimes hundreds, of individual textiles, especially for a person of high status. The finest, most prized cloths accumulated over a lifetime. Those intricate pile cloths, the richly patterned pieces, the symbols of their wealth and identity, would be used to envelop the body. It was a way of sending them off in splendor, dressed in their accomplishments, literally wrapped in their social persona. Anthropologists and historians still argue whether the primary function of vast quantities of raffia cloth used in Kongo funerary rituals was to honor the deceased by displaying their accumulated wealth and reinforcing the status of their surviving lineage, or if it served a more direct spiritual purpose, such as providing sustenance, comfort, or even a kind of passage fire for the soul on its journey to Wemband, the land of the dead. Respect and a private provision for the spirit. The sheer amount of labor and artistry consigned to the earth in these burials speak volumes about the value placed on both the individual and the ancestral realm. The durability of raffia fiber means that in some remarkable archaeological finds, particularly in drier cave environments, these ancient funerary bundles, or GM have been preserved, offering us a tangible, if fragile, link to these centuries-old practices. Quirky, rather poignant tidbit connected to these final rites. Among some Kongo groups, and indeed in other related cultures, it was believed that an individual's sleeping mat absorbed something of their essence, their life force, or their spirit. Over the many years they used it, it makes a certain kind of intimate sense, doesn't it? Upon their death, this personal mat, so closely connected to their daily existence and their dream, might be carefully buried with them. Alternatively, specific strands from this mat could be unwoven and then reincorporated into the funerary textiles being prepared for their burial, ensuring that a tangible part of their unique being accompanied them to the spirit world. Talk about taking your favorite, most personal blanket with you into the great beyond. It's a deeply touching concept of continuity. So, from the soft wrap of infancy, through the symbolic attire of initiation and marriage, to the final, elaborate embrace of the funerary shroud, Raffia Textiles are there, present at every turn. They absorb the joys, sorrows, the solemnities, and the celebrations of Kongo life, each thread woven by those skilled hands, each pattern imbued with meaning, becomes part of an individual's personal history, and collectively part of the kingdom's enduring story. You can almost feel the weight of these traditions, the comforting presence of these textiles, as they mark out the universal human journey. From one horizon to the next, you've journeyed with raffia as it adorned newborns, celebrated unions, and shrouded the departed each thread woven into the very fabric of Kongo life. You've seen how its patterns became a silent language, and its quality a mark of kings. Now, prepare to see this versatile material take on yet another crucial role, one that underpins the entire economic pulse of the kingdom. The same fibers that offered comfort and conveyed status are about to jingle, or perhaps more accurately, rustle, in the marketplace as currency. That's right, those meticulously crafted pieces of raffia cloth became more than just garments or symbols. They became money. It's a fascinating transformation, isn't it? From a plant in the swampy lowlands, processed by those skilled hands we've come to appreciate, into a recognized medium of exchange. The value, as you've learned, was derived from the labor invested, the skill required for its production, durability, and the social and symbolic weight it carried. As certain types of raffia cloth became standardized in size and quality, they began to function as a reliable measure of value. In a world without minted coins as you might know them, you couldn't just whip out your ancient Kongo credit card, which, I suppose, would have been a particularly shiny shell or a very well-behaved chicken. Instead, for many transactions, you'd be dealing in textiles. These raffia currency units were often known as iliboni, singular, yiliboni, plural, were that in some modern Kikongo derived language still means money, or sometimes referred to by early European observers by terms like rimpumkumgyo. They weren't usually the elaborate patterned prestige cloths you saw adorning royalty or used in major life cycle events, though those certainly held immense value. Instead, the common currency often consisted of small, plain, undecorated squares or rectangles of woven raffia palm leaf fibers. Think of them as the workaday bills and coins of their time. These pieces were typically of a fairly standardized size, perhaps about a handspan square, though this could vary by region and period. They were lightweight, relatively portable, and could be bundled together in larger denominations. Imagine yourself in a bustling Kongo marketplace. The air is thick with the scent of smoked fish, ripe plantains, and perhaps the slightly raw, acrid smell of iron tools fresh from the forge. You hear the chatter of bargaining, the laughter of children, the bleating of goats, and everywhere you see raffia, not just as clothing, but as the very grease that oils the wheels of commerce. A farmer wants to buy a new hoe blade from a smith. He might offer a certain number of these raffia squares. A woman sells a basket of yams and receives a small stack of yilubon in return, which she then uses to purchase some dried fish or a string of colorful beads brought by a trader from a distant village. Imagine trying to buy a new canoe with a giant pile of tiny raffia squares. Do you have change for 1,000 palm threads? Mate, it probably made for some bulky wallets, or perhaps more accurately, carrying bags. The Kongo Kingdom, a mainstream historical fact for you, possessed extensive internal and regional trade networks long before any ships from Europe appeared on their Atlantic horizon. There were established markets, well-trodden trade routes connecting different parts of the kingdom, and various forms of local currency used to facilitate exchange. Raffia cloth was one of the most significant and widely accepted of these, particularly in the coastal and near-coastal regions, where the raffia palm grew abundantly and weaving was a major industry. Its use as currency wasn't unique to the Kongo. Similar cloth currencies existed in other parts of West and Central Africa, but in Kongo, it achieved a particular level of sophistication and widespread acceptance. The Mani Kongo and the ruling elite naturally played a significant role in this raffia-based economy. They could levy taxes payable in raffia cloth, which then flowed into the royal treasuries at Bambanza, Kongo. This not only concentrated wealth, but also gave the king a powerful tool for patronage, for paying officials and soldiers, and for funding royal projects. By controlling royal projects, or influencing the production and distribution of these currency cloths, the central authority could exert a degree of economic control. Furthermore, this readily available and accepted currency facilitated the collection and redistribution of resources throughout the kingdom, helping to bind its various provinces together. Economists and historians still debate the extent to which the use of raffia cloth as currency in the Kongo kingdom represented a true general-purpose money, like modern cash that can buy anything, or if its function was more restricted, primarily serving as a special-purpose currency. This means it might have been used mainly for specific types of transactions, such as paying bride wealth, as you saw in the last section, settling legal fines, tribute payments to chiefs, or for trade in certain categories of goods, while other transactions might still have relied on direct barter or other forms of currency, like shells or metal goods. The reality is probably a mix. It was certainly a vital medium of exchange, even if its applications weren't as universally fluid as the coins in your pocket today. Now for a quirky little tidbit about this textile money. Some anecdotal sources and oral traditions suggest that particularly old or well-traveled pieces of raffia currency were sometimes considered more valuable than newly made ones. This wasn't necessarily due to their material condition. In fact, older ones might be more worn. Instead, it was thought that these veteran Rubonui had accumulated experience, stories, or even a measure of luck or prestige from passing through many hands and many transactions. It's a bit like how an old coin with a rich history might feel more special than a freshly minted one, a sort of vintage charm for your ancient money, perhaps even believed to bring good fortune to the next transaction. If your raffia currency got a bit frayed, did its value decrease? Could you get a discount for slightly used money? Or did that fraying add to its mystique? These are the important economic questions history rarely answers with the clarity a modern accountant would demand. So, this humble plant fiber, through ingenuity and societal agreement, has become a cornerstone of economic life. Account, a medium of exchange, and a store of value, ticking many of the boxes economists look for in money. You can almost feel the pulse of the Kongo economy in the rhythmic production of these raffia squares, in their bundling and counting, their exchange for all the necessities and modest luxuries of daily life. The threads of the raffia palm are not just weaving together a society culturally and spiritually, as we saw them do in life's rich tapestry. They are quite literally weaving together its economic foundations, enabling a vibrant internal market and preparing the way for even broader commercial interactions that are just over the horizon. You've seen raffia cloth function as the very currency of the Kongo kingdom, its bundled squares facilitating everything from daily purchases in a bustling market to the grand exchanges of tribute and bride wealth. The internal economic rhythms of the kingdom beat strongly, largely in time with the production and circulation of these versatile textiles. But now, listen closely. Over the sound of the familiar surf on the Atlantic coast, you can hear a new sound, a different kind of creak from ship's timbers, a different kind of call from sailors. A new wind is blowing, carrying with it the sails of European ships, and these Atlantic breezes are about to introduce new threads, new desires, and profound new challenges to the Kongo world. It's the late 15th century. Imagine yourself on the coast, perhaps near the mouth of the great Nazadi or Kongo River. One day, objects appear on the horizon unlike any you've ever seen. Tall ships with billowing white sails. So ships different from the dugout canoes that ply your coastal waters. These are the caravels of Portuguese explorers. A key mainstream historical fact here is that the Portuguese explorer Diogo Cao is credited with reaching the mouth of the Kongo River in 1483. This marked the first sustained documented contact between the Kongo kingdom and a European power, an event that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of this Central African society. What must it have felt like to see these stranger vessels, these pale-skinned men with their unfamiliar clothes and even more unfamiliar languages? Curiosity, certainly; apprehension, perhaps; opportunity, might be. Initial interactions are cautious, a mixture of diplomacy and trade. The Portuguese are keen to discover the riches of this new land, and the Congo are intrigued by these newcomers and the goods they bring, and what goods they are. Suddenly your meticulously woven raffia loincloth, the height of local fashion and a testament to indigenous artistry, has to compete with bolts of European wool, linen, and a little later, vibrant cotton textiles imported from India via Portuguese trade route. They bring gleaming metalware, glass beads of colors rarely seen, mirrors that capture your reflection with startling clarity, and of course, wine and firearms. It's like when a new smartphone drops. Suddenly your perfectly good 6-month-old model feels ancient. Except here, the upgrade might give you a rash, both literally and metaphorically. The allure of these foreign goods, especially for the Congo elite, the Mani Kongo and his court, is undeniable. The fact, novelty, the different textures, the bright, chemically produced dyes of some European cloths, offer new ways to display status and wealth. Historians still argue whether the early Congo elite's adoption of European dress, titles like Dame or Duke, and eventually aspects of Christianity was primarily a genuine embrace of a perceived superior culture and its associated religion, or a calculated political strategy to enhance their own authority and facilitate trade by adopting the outward symbols of their powerful new foreign partners. It was likely a complex blend of genuine curiosity, spiritual seeking, and astute political maneuvering. But what did this mean for your beloved raffia? Did it just get tossed aside, like last season's fashion? Not at all. At least not immediately or entirely. Raffia was too deeply embedded. Remember, it was the currency of the kingdom. It was central to ritual life. It was what people knew how to make and what they were comfortable wearing. However, you start to see a divergence. The finest Congo weavers, those skilled hands we've admired, might now find their patrons also desiring imported silks or velvets. Some Congo artisans, ever resourceful, might have even begun to unravel imported European cloths to obtain their brightly colored threads, reweaving them into their own raffia textiles to create new, hybrid designs, a fascinating fusion of local tradition and foreign influence. The Portuguese, for their part, quickly recognized the local importance of raffia cloth, especially as currency. While they wanted gold, copper, ivory, and increasingly and devastatingly enslaved people, they often had to engage with the existing economic systems. They would trade their European goods for raffia currency, which they could then use to procure the items they truly sought further inland. So, raffia cloth itself became an export commodity, not just for its intrinsic value as a textile, but because it was the local money. The Portuguese probably tried to pay for a priceless ancestral mask or a hefty tusk of ivory with a handful of shiny glass beads. And you can just imagine the Congo traders, savvy in their own right, being like, "That's cute, add a few bolts of that vibrant red woolen cloth, and maybe a barrel of wine, and then we'll talk." International haggling, even in its early days, was an art form. This new Atlantic trade, however, began to subtly and then dramatically shift the economic and political landscape. The demand for certain Congo goods, particularly enslaved individuals, to work on Portuguese sugar plantations in Sao Tome and later Brazil, started to reorient trade patterns and create immense social pressures, while raffia production continued and even expanded in some areas to meet the demands of this new trade. Its relative importance in the grand scheme of international commerce began to be overshadowed by the tragic rise of the slave trade. The winds of change were blowing, and not all of them were favorable. Here's a quirky little aside for you. Some early Kongo accounts, often filtered through later oral traditions or noted by discerning missionaries, describe the initial reaction to certain European textiles in ways that might surprise you. For instance, the coarse, heavy woolen cloths common in Europe were apparently not always appreciated. They were hot in the tropical climate and could feel incredibly itchy against skin. Accustomed to the softer, breathable raffia, or the fine cottons that also made their way through internal African trade routes, one can almost hear a Kongo nobleman, presented with a fine woolen cloak, remarking under his breath that it felt like wearing the hide of a hairy beast. It suggests that exotic didn't always automatically equate to better or more desirable in the eyes of the Kongo consumer, at least not initially. Perhaps they were the original textile snobs, and given the quality of their own best work, they had every right to be. So, you're standing at a fascinating and somewhat perilous crossroads. The world of the Kongo is expanding. New materials are arriving. New opportunities for trade are opening up. But these new connections are also bringing new competitions, new power dynamics, and the seas of future turmoil. The Raffia Textiles, so central to Kongo identity and economy, are now part of a much larger, more complex global exchange, their threads becoming interwoven with a destiny that is no longer entirely their own to weave. The Atlantic breezes carry promise, but also the scent of profound and often painful transformation. You felt the first gusts of those Atlantic breezes, bringing new goods and new faces to the Kongo shores, a wind that carried both promise and the seas of profound change. Before we delve further into how those interactions unfolded, it is crucial to understand more deeply what lay at the very heart of Kongo identity, something woven not just into their social fabric and economy, but into their very understanding of life, death, and the cosmos itself. The Raffia Textiles, those patiently crafted hieroglyphs we've explored, were far more than just cloth. They were maps of meaning, canvases upon which the Kongo people painted their vision of the universe. Imagine you are sitting with a Kongo elder, a keeper of wisdom, as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of red and orange. The conversation turns from the mundane to the profound. They might begin to explain that the world you see, the world of the living, is only one part of a much larger, cyclical reality. This brings us to a central element of Kongo thought, the Bidkenga dia Kongo, or the Kongo cosmogram. This potent symbol, often depicted as a circle or a diamond, with a cross at its center dividing it into 4 sections, is a visual representation of the eternal journey of the soul. It's not just a pretty pattern. It's a philosophical statement. So, your raffia cloth wasn't just keeping you decent. It was also a handy pocket guide to the universe. Try getting mint-hat from your average t-shirt. The 4 points of the Bidkenga often correspond to the cardinal directions, but more importantly, they represent the 4 moments of the sun's journey, and by extension, the journey of human life. Sunrise in the human life. Each signifies birth and new beginnings. Noon, at the top, represents the peak of life, vitality, and responsibility in the physical world. Sunset in the west marks death, the passage from the physical world, and midnight at the bottom represents existence in the spiritual world, the realm of the ancestors, Ribakulu, a place of wisdom and power from which new life will eventually re-emerge. The circle itself embodies this continuous loop, this unceasing dance between the visible world of the living Yin and the invisible world of the spirits, Rienasi, Abafran, or Rimpemba. Now look again at those intricate raffia textiles with this understanding. Suddenly, those abstract geometric patterns we discussed in Section 4 take on even deeper resonance. A spiral might not just be a spiral, it could be a direct allusion to this cyclical journey of life, death, and rebirth. A diamond shape, frequently seen, could be a shorthand for the entire cosmogram. Interlacing patterns might speak to the interconnectedness of these two worlds, the living and the dead, and the dead and the dead, the paths between them. The colors used in dyeing the raffia fibers also carried profound cosmological weight. White, often derived from kaolin clay, was strongly associated with Rikembe, the spirit world, representing clarity, purity, coolness, and communication with the ancestors. You saw this in the funerary bundles. The Wimfinde, often featuring white cloth, red, typically from redwood powder, Tukula, symbolized blood, life, energy, transition, and mediation. The active boundary between worlds, black from charcoal or mud, could signify the physical world, night, or the mystery of creation. The interplay of these colors on a textile wasn't just for show. It was a deliberate encoding of cosmic principles. Mainstream historical fact is that the Kongo worldview was suffused with spirituality. They believed in a supreme creator, often called Nzambi Ampangu, who was generally seen as remote, having delegated power to a host of nature spirits, territorial spirits, Ansimbi, and other entities that could influence daily life. Crucially, ancestors were not truly gone. They remained active participants in the affairs of their living descendants, mediating between them and the higher spiritual powers. Rituals, often involving specific objects called Winkizi, singular Unkizi, which could be containers, figures, or bundle holding medicines and potent substances, were performed to engage these spirits and ancestors. Textiles, with their cosmological patterns and charged colors, were frequently integral to these rituals, serving as backdrops, wrappers for sacred objects, or garments for ritual specialists. Scholars of African art and religion still debate the precise extent to which the general populace understood the deepest cosmological symbolism embedded in complex textile patterns, like those mirroring the Kudai. Was this esoteric knowledge the primary domain of the Wangai ritual specialists, chiefs, and perhaps the master weavers themselves, with most other people appreciating the designs on a more general symbolic or purely aesthetic level? Or was there a more widespread, if perhaps less articulated, understanding of these cosmic maps woven into their daily lives? It's likely there were layers of meaning, accessible to different people at different levels, much like a complex religious painting in other traditions. And for a truly fascinating, if somewhat fringe tidbit, it's whispered that some master weavers, when tasked with creating cloths for particularly sacred or cosmologically significant purposes, would take extraordinary measures. They might orient their very looms to align with the cardinal points of the Baikengai cosmogram. Or they might choose to work only at specific times of day, sunrise, high noon, sunset, or the dead of night, believing these moments to be energetically potent intersections in the cosmic cycle. By doing so, they weren't just weaving raffia. They were quite literally attempting to weave time, space, and spiritual intention directly into the fabric. Imagine the focus, the dedication, the sense of participating in a cosmic act with every pass of the shuttle. You can see how these textiles were far more than material possessions. They were a way of thinking, a way of situating oneself within the grand scheme of existence. They affirmed connection to the ancestors, to the land, and to the spiritual forces that animated the world. You spilled palm wine on your cosmogram-patterned loincloth during a lively debate about, say, the latest harvest. Did you just create a minor cosmic imbalance? Or was it simply a laundry problem requiring some patient attention? These are the kinds of everyday philosophical quandaries that keep me up at night. You know, when I'm not thinking about the socio-economic impact of Portuguese trade, as those Atlantic breezes we mentioned earlier begin to blow more insistently, bringing new religions like Christianity and new materialistic priorities. These deeply embedded cosmological views, so beautifully expressed in Raffia, would face new questions and challenges. Imagine trying to explain the profound, cyclical nature of existence as depicted on your sacred cloth to a European trader, whose primary interest lay in how many ivory tusks you could provide by next Tuesday. No, this elegant interlace isn't just pretty, my friend. It represents the unbreakable bond between the living and the ancestors. Now, about that rather shiny musket you have there. The conversation must have been interesting. The resilience and adaptability of these core beliefs and their continued expression in art would be tested in the centuries to come. You've journeyed deep into the Kongo worldview, seeing how their understanding of the cosmos, the unending cycle of life and spirit, was meticulously woven into the very warp and weft of their Raffia Textiles. These cloths were far more than material. They were philosophical statements, sacred maps. Now, let's bring our gaze back to the hands that made them, and the bodies that wore them, to unravel the intricate gender dynamics spun into every stage of raffia production and its daily use. Who did what? Who wore what? And what did it all say about being a man or a woman in the Kongo kingdom? The creation of a single piece of raffia cloth, from palm tree to finished product, was often a collaborative effort, though the tasks were frequently divided along gender lines. Imagine the process again, venturing into those humid, swampy groves to harvest the giant raffia fronds. This was arduous work, requiring strength and a certain daring, and as such, it often fell to the men of the community. They were the ones wielding the machetes or axes, selecting the best palms, and hauling the heavy bounty back to the village. So, gentlemen, next time you complain about assembling that piece of flat-pack furniture from your favorite Swedish store, just picture yourself wrestling a 20-meter palm frond out of a muddy swamp. Puts things into perspective, doesn't it? Once the fronds arrived, the next crucial stages of transformation typically involved the patient and dexterous labor of women. It was often women who undertook the painstaking task of stripping the fibrous layer from each leaflet. Carefully separating the usable material from the waste, they would then manage the sun-drying process, turning the fibers and watching for the perfect level of desiccation, and that critical job of splitting the dried fibers into finer, more pliable strands for weaving. That, too, frequently was women's work, requiring a delicate touch and an almost meditative focus, hour after hour, producing the essential raw material for the looms. If a husband then complained about the quality of the raffia fiber his wife had so painstakingly prepared, you can only imagine the ensuing domestic discussions. Look, darling, if you desire threads as fine as spider silk, perhaps you should try whispering sweet nothings to the palm tree yourself before it's harvested. Then came the dyeing. If the cloth was to be colored, This could be a specialized task, sometimes undertaken by women, sometimes by men, depending on the specific pigments and techniques involved. Preparing the dye baths from barks, roots, leaves, or clays was an art in itself, a kind of forest alchemy. And now, the weaving. Here, in the Kongo and many related Central African cultures, we encounter a significant pattern. The actual weaving of raffia cloth on the single heddle, round loom, or sometimes an upright variant, was predominantly men's work. This is a key mainstream historical fact, while women in many other parts of Africa and the world are the primary weavers, especially of cotton on different loom types. Kongo raffia cloth production was largely a male domain. You'd see a man seated at his loom, often in a shaded spot, his hands and feet expertly manipulating the heddles, shuttle and beater, transforming those prepared fibers into fabric. Creation of the ilubongui, those raffia squares that served as the currency of the kingdom we discussed, was thus largely in male hands. Anthropologists and gender historians still debate the underlying reasons for this particular division. The predominantly male role in Kongo raffia weaving, an indicator that the cloth itself gained higher status because it was men's work, or conversely, did men gravitate towards and eventually dominate the weaving of raffia precisely because the material and its products, including currency and high-status prestige items, were already so economically and symbolically significant, thereby aligning powerful or ambitious men with its direct production. It's a classic chicken or egg question, with the answer likely involving a complex interplay of economic value, skill codification, and pre-existing social structures. Once the cloth was woven, further embellishment, such as creating those luxurious cut-pile velvets, intricate embroidery with contrasting fibers, or applying applique designs, could involve either men or women, sometimes working in specialized workshops, particularly for royal commissions. And what about wearing commissions? These textiles, did his weave translate directly to her adornment, or his own? Clothing styles certainly differed between men and women, though both valued raffia for its versatility and comfort. Men typically wore a loincloth or a larger wrapper draped around the waist, and sometimes over one shoulder. Women generally wear a skirt or wrappers of varying lengths, often more voluminous than men's. Special occasions, as you've seen, called for more elaborate attire for both sexes, larger pieces of cloth, finer weaves, and more intricate patterns that could signal status, lineage, or ritual role, building upon those woven hieroglyphs and cosmic maps. Caps and headwear, often made of raffia, were also important markers for both men and women, with specific styles indicating rank, marital status, or profession. It wasn't like today where you can just dash out and grab something off the sale rack. Your complete outfit was often a significant team effort, potentially involving half the village, several months of someone's life, and a whole lot of palm tree fast fashion. This was most certainly not. Some folk tales and oral traditions offer intriguing, if sometimes contradictory, glimpses into the gendered nature of weaving. You might hear a story about a mythical first weaver, often a man who was gifted the knowledge of the loom and its secrets by a powerful nature spirit, perhaps a female water deity, Ian Simbi, who showed him how to construct the loom and interlace the threads, thereby giving a kind of spiritual or mythological sanction to men's dominant role in this specific craft. Then again, other tales might feature clever women outsmarting men in weaving competitions by inventing new, dazzling patterns, or by weaving with impossible speed and skill. A bit of playful gender rivalry and a nod to female ingenuity woven directly into the cultural lore. These stories suggest that while roles might have been defined, the interplay and mutual respect or friendly competition between genders were also part of the rich social fabric. So, while the phrase his weave, her adornment might hold some truth in that men often wove the cloth that both they and women wore, it's more nuanced. Women's critical role in fiber preparation was indispensable. Without their skilled labor, there would be no threads to weave. Both men and women expressed their identity, status, and connection to the cosmos through the raffia they wore. The gender dynamics of raffia were not about rigid hierarchy alone, but about a complex, interdependent system where each contribution was vital to the creation of vital. These beautiful, meaningful, and utterly essential textiles that define so much of Kongo life. You've explored the intricate dance of gender in the creation of Kongo raffia textiles, from the men often harvesting the fronds and weaving the cloth, to the women meticulously preparing the fibers that form the very foundation of this art. Now, as those Atlantic breezes you first felt in Section 7 begin to blow with greater insistence, carrying not just new goods, but also challenging new ideologies and the looming shadow of colonial ambitions, you witness how these textiles, threads of identity, become something more, silent banners of cultural resilience, with resistance woven into every fiber. The context is shifting, sometimes subtly, sometimes with brutal speed. The initial encounters with Portuguese traders, once perhaps tinged with novelty and cautious curiosity, are increasingly complicated by the horrific expansion of the Atlantic slave trade, which tears at the very fabric of Kongo society. Christian missionaries arrive, earnestly seeking to convert the Kongo people, sometimes viewing traditional spiritual practices and their associated regalia, including certain raffia garments and masks, with suspicion or outright hostility. European political and economic interests begin to exert more direct pressure on the Mani Kongo and the kingdom's sovereignty. It's a period of immense flux and growing unease. In such a climate, how do you hold on to who you are? How do you assert your identity when powerful outside forces seek to reshape it? For the Kongo people, as for many cultures facing similar pressures, the answer often lay in the quiet, persistent continuation of their own traditions, and what was more visibly, tangibly textiles. Imagine a Kongo noble, perhaps one who has nominally adopted some European customs, or even a Christian name, to navigate these new power structures, yet beneath an imported cloak, or in the privacy of his own domain, or on occasions of deep traditional significance, he continues to wear the intricately patterned raffia wrappers of his ancestors. This isn't just about comfort or habit. It's a statement. It's a way of saying, despite everything, we are still Kongo. Our cosmology, our history, our values, they are still woven here. So when the missionary perhaps suggested your traditional raffia outfit, rich with those cosmic hieroglyphs we talked about, wasn't quite civilized enough, you could just point to yours incredibly complex pattern and mentally retort, "Oh really, does your plain wool tunic explain the entire universe and the journey of the soul? I didn't think so." A silent mic drop, Kongo style. This form of resistance isn't always about pitched battles or overt rebellion, though those certainly occurred at various points in Kongo history. Often, it's more subtle, more insidious from the perspective of those trying to impose change. It's the refusal to let go. It's the mother who continues to teach her daughter the ancient symbols and their meanings as she prepares raffia fibers, even as the mission school down the road preaches a different worldview. It's the weaver who, despite the availability of imported cotton thread, continues to master the difficult art of creating the finest, softest raffia, imbuing it with patterns that speak of Kongo heritage. Acts repeated thousands of times across the kingdom form a powerful undercurrent of cultural self-preservation. Sometimes this resistance could be even more cleverly encoded. Think of those woven hieroglyphs, again, in a climate of oppression or unwelcome influence. The meanings of certain symbols might take on new layers of significance, understood by insiders but opaque to outsiders. A pattern that traditionally symbolized, say, the scales of a crocodile, representing power and adaptability, might now also carry a hidden transcript of resilience in the face of foreign encroachment. It's the ultimate passive-aggressive statement. Yes, I acknowledge your presence. I might even wear the hat you gave me, but I'll just be over here, weaving the collective wisdom and defiance of my ancestors into my skirt. You do you. A mainstream historical fact relevant here is that throughout the colonial period in Africa and in other parts of the world, dress, bodily adornment, and textile traditions have consistently been used as powerful tools to subtly or overtly resist colonial domination, maintain cultural boundaries, and express identities that were under threat. The persistence of indigenous styles, patterns, and materials, even when European goods were readily available or actively promoted, sometimes even enforced, is a widespread testament to the deep connection between clothing and cultural identity. The Kongo Kingdom's long encounter with European powers, starting much earlier than full-blown colonization for many other African regions, provides an early and complex example of these dynamics. Historians and cultural theorists still debate the extent to which the continued use of traditional Kongo raffia attire during these periods of intense European contact and early colonial pressure was always a conscious act of political or cultural resistance. Was it sometimes more a reflection of economic realities? Imported cloth was expensive, ingrained cultural preference for familiar materials and styles, or simply the slower pace of sartorial change outside of the most elite, missionized, or urbanized circles? The answer is likely multifaceted. For some, wearing raffia might have been an explicit act of defiance. For others, a matter of comfort and custom. For many, probably a complex blend of all these motivations. And now for a quirky, almost conspiratorial tidbit. There are whispers that have filtered down through some Kongo oral histories and anecdotal accounts about weavers employing almost invisible acts of defiance during times when pressure to adopt foreign ways was particularly intense, or when creating items destined for colonial officials or to roughly Europeanized Kongo elites. Some weavers would supposedly intentionally weave tiny, almost imperceptible flaws into the fabric, or incorporate minuscule traditional symbols known only to their own community. These would be hidden in plain sight, a secret mark of enduring Kongo spirit, a tiny textile graffiti tag saying, "We're still here. We remember." It's a delightful image of agency and subtle subversion, a pinprick of cultural continuity in the face of overwhelming pressure. Imagine, too, a Kongo dignitary, perhaps compelled by circumstance to wear a stuffy, restrictive European doublet and hose for an official meeting with Portuguese traders or administrators. You can almost picture him, beneath it all, secretly wearing his favorite super soft and breathable raffia undershirt, a small, personal comfort, yes, but also a tiny, private rebellion against itchy cultural imposition and a reminder of his true sartorial heritage. So, as the world around the Kongo Kingdom changes, as new powers assert themselves and new ideologies take root, the Raffia Textiles take on this added dimension. They are not just art, not just currency, not just ritual objects. They become potent symbols of identity, quiet assertions of an enduring heritage. Every thread pulled, every pattern woven, in the traditional way becomes a small act of holding on, a testament to the strength and resilience of a culture determined to keep its own stories, its own cosmology, alive in the very fabric of its daily life. The whispers of the palm, once articulating creation myths and social order, now also begin to murmur messages of endurance. You've seen how the raffia threads of the Kongo became silent banners of cultural identity, woven with defiance and ancestral memory in the face of those early Atlantic breezes carrying change. But those breezes, over time, grew into stronger gale, bringing pressures that would begin to unravel not just the intricate patterns of the cloth, but the very fabric of the kingdom itself. Now, you must navigate a more poignant era, the twilight of the independent Kongo kingdom, and witness how the ancient craft of raffia weaving began to shift under the immense weight of colonial ambitions and internal strife. The centuries following those initial European contacts, particularly from the 17th through the 19th, were tumultuous for the Kongo. The kingdom, once a powerful and relatively centralized state, found itself increasingly beset by a multitude of challenges. Internally, disputes over royal succession often led to civil wars, weakening the central authority of the Mani Kongo. Externally, the insatiable European demand for enslaved people fueled conflict, tore communities apart, and drastically altered social and economic landscapes. Portuguese military interventions became more frequent and more aggressive, chipping away at Kongo's sovereignty. Other local powers rose, further fragmenting the old kingdom. It's hard to focus on weaving a cosmically significant pattern when there's a very real chance your village might be raided next Tuesday. The muse of textile art, you see, tends to be a bit sensitive to widespread existential threats. A devastating blow, a mainstream historical fact, often cited as a crucial turning point, was the Battle of Anguilla in 1665. Suffered a catastrophic defeat at the hands of the Portuguese and their African allies. The Mani Kongo Antonio I was killed and beheaded, his crown and royal regalia sent back to Lisbon as trophies. This event marked a profound crisis, signaling the irreversible decline of the Kongo kingdom as a unified, independent political entity. While various Kongo polities continued to exist, the old centralized power and prestige were shattered. What did this unraveling mean for the delicate art of raffia weaving? The consequences were manifold. Firstly, the disruption of traditional life was immense. Constant warfare, the displacement of communities, and the general atmosphere of insecurity made it difficult for artisans to practice their craft consistently or to pass down complex skills to the next generation. The long, peaceful periods required to produce those elaborate, high-status textiles became rare luxuries. Secondly, the system of patronage changed dramatically. Court at Bambanza, Kongo, once the primary patron and consumer of the most exquisite threads of royalty, lost much of its wealth and influence. Provincial chiefs and nobles, caught up in their own struggles for survival and power, had diminished capacity to commission or acquire the finest raffia work. Those silent banners of identity we spoke of in the last section were still being waved, but often by hands weary from conflict and uncertainty. Furthermore, the economic landscape was transforming. The demand for meticulously woven raffia currency, once the lifeblood of local markets, probably took a significant nosedive. Imported European factory-made textiles, like colorful Indian cottons, madras, and cheap European prints, became more widely available, sometimes through trade, sometimes as payment for slaves, sometimes as deliberate tools to foster dependency. These new cloths offered novelty, vibrant colors often unobtainable with local dyes, and, crucially, they were often less labor-intensive to acquire than producing high-quality raffia. Sorry, old chap, you can almost hear a trader saying, "Your beautifully intricate raffia square is truly a work of art, but this shiny blue glass bead, and it just unpops." And this yard of printed cotton makes a much louder statement at the village dance. Historians and art historians still debate whether the noticeable decline in the production of the most elaborate Kongo raffia pilecloths, those incredibly soft Kongo velvets, during the 18th and 19th centuries, was primarily due to the loss of a light patronage and the disruption of complex socio-economic systems that supported such specialized craft, or if the immense labor and highly specialized knowledge required for their creation simply became unsustainable in the face of widespread social upheaval and the availability of cheaper, albeit very different, imported luxury textiles. It was likely a painful combination of all these factors to maintain centuries-old, labor-intensive weaving traditions, while your kingdom is fragmenting and European factories are churning out cloth like there's no tomorrow. That's rather like trying to run a small, bespoke artisanal bakery right next door to a giant, all-you-can-eat industrial donut factory. It's a tough gig, yet the craft of raffia weaving did not simply vanish. It adapted, it shifted, found new niches. While the Grand Royal Commissions dwindled, raffia continued to be woven for local use, for everyday clothing, for sleeping mats, for baskets, and for essential ritual items in communities that held onto their ancestral practices. The patterns might have become simpler in some areas, the techniques less refined, reflecting the loss of specialized knowledge or simply less time available for intricate work, but the connection to the material, to the process, endured. And here's a quirky and rather telling tidbit about this era of transformation. Some weavers, particularly as the colonial period solidified in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, faced with a declining market for traditional high art raffia pieces, reportedly began incorporating European-inspired motifs into their raffia work. You might see stylized letters of the alphabet, perhaps the initials of a colonial official or a mission station, or floral patterns clearly borrowed from imported chintz fabrics, all painstakingly rendered in raffia. It was a curious hybrid, a bit like your great-grandma discovering emojis and trying to incorporate them into her traditional needlepoint, sometimes charmingly awkward, surprisingly innovative, and always a sign of a culture grappling with and responding to new realities. These weren't just acts of appropriation. They were also acts of translation, of trying to make sense of a changing world through a familiar medium. So, you find yourself in a landscape of fading grandeur, where the old certainties are crumbling. The great looms that once produced vast quantities of royal cloth and currency are perhaps fewer, their rhythms less constant. Vibrant marketplaces, while still active, now buzz with new languages and new materials that compete with the ancient whispers of the palm. Yet, even in this twilight, the threads of raffia are not entirely broken. They are being respun, rewoven into new forms, carrying the echoes of the past into an uncertain future, a testament to the enduring human need to create, to adorn, and to connect with the tangible essence of culture. Even as the world shifts beneath one's feet, you've walked through the poignant twilight of the Kongo kingdom, witnessing how colonial pressures and internal strife began to fray the ancient traditions of raffia weaving, though the threads of the craft, while shifting, were not entirely broken. Now, prepare for a journey of unimaginable sorrow, yet also of profound resilience, for even as the kingdom faced its decline, its cultural seeds, embedded in the minds and muscle memories of its people, were being forcibly scattered across the vast, unforgiving Atlantic. We follow these diasporic threads, carried by enslaved Kongo men, women, and children, to see how their ancestral weaving traditions sought to reroot and re-emerge in new, often hostile, lands. The transatlantic slave trade, that horrific chapter of human history, saw millions of Africans uprooted from their homes and transported in brutal conditions to the Americas. Among these unwilling travelers, a significant number hail from the Kongo region and its surrounding areas. This is a crucial mainstream historical fact. Large concentrations of Congolese people were brought to colonies in Brazil, across the Caribbean, notably Haiti, Cuba, and Jamaica, and to various parts of the southern United States, especially South Carolina and Louisiana. They carried with them not just their bodies to be exploited for labor, but also their languages, their music, their religious beliefs, and, yes, the indelible imprint of their material culture, including the principles of their textile arts. Imagine the scene. A recently arrived Kongo individual, stripped of nearly everything, standing on the auction block or toiling in a strange new field. The raffia palms of their homeland are nowhere to be seen. The looms, the dyes, the specific tools, are left behind or lost. What remains? Memory, skill, the ingrained knowledge of how to process plant fibers, how to interlace strands, how to create patterns that hold meaning. Those skilled hands we've come to know, which once transformed palm leaves into royal cloth or cosmic maps, now had to adapt to find new materials, new ways to give form to an enduring cultural sensibility. So even if you couldn't get your hands on actual raffia, the idea of that intricate weave, that meaningful pattern, was apparently more stubborn than a particularly determined donkey, and twice as resolved to survive the arduous ocean journey. And so they adapted. In the place of raffia, they might have used palmetto leaves, sweetgrass, rushes, corn husks, or even discarded scraps of European cloth. The techniques of plaiting, coiling, and weaving, once applied to raffia for mats, baskets, and clothing, were now applied to these new materials, while producing fine cloth comparable to Kongo raffia textiles was often impossible under the harsh conditions of slavery and the lack of appropriate raw materials. The creation of functional and sometimes subtly expressive items like baskets, fans, and sleeping mats continued. These weren't just utilitarian objects. They were often carriers of retained African aesthetic preferences for certain geometric patterns, for particular ways of organizing space, for a certain rhythmic quality in the design. You might see echoes of Kongo cosmology, like the Uidai Kangingao cross or spiral, subtly appearing in the bottom of a coiled sweetgrass basket in South Carolina, or in the patterns of a quilt stitched together from discarded fabric scraps. Of course, direct, unbroken lines of descent for specific patterns are incredibly hard to prove. Scholars and art historians still fiercely debate the extent to which specific African textile patterns and techniques, particularly those from the Kongo region, can be definitively traced and proven to have survived in recognizable forms in African American or Afro-Caribbean crafts. Is it a direct lineage, or more a case of shared West and Central African aesthetic principles resurfacing, or even a convergent evolution of design under similar conditions of resource, scarcity, and cultural syncretism? It's a complex academic puzzle, piecing together fragments across continents and centuries. Yet, the resonance is often too strong to ignore. Consider African American quilting traditions, for example. The strip piecing techniques, the improvisational nature of many designs, the use of bold geometric forms, and the vibrant color combinations Many scholars see strong parallels with West and Central African textile traditions, including those of the Kongo. The idea of a textile that tells a story, that embodies community, that can be read. These concepts, so central to Kongo raffia art, might well have found new expression in these new forms. It's like that cherished family recipe that gets passed down through generations, even when some of the original ingredients are no longer available or have to be substituted. You adapt, you improvise, but the soul of the dish, or in this case, the soul of the weave, somehow endures. And for a quirky, almost magical tidbit, in some maroon communities, those remarkable settlements established by escaped slaves deep in the forests or mountains of the Americas, fighting to create free lives, there are folktales. These tales whisper of elders, often women, who possessed an almost supernatural ability. They could supposedly identify a person's specific African origin, sometimes even their original Kongo clan or village, simply by observing the way they plaited their hair, or the specific technique they used to weave a simple grass mat, or even the rhythm of their work. These were tiny, almost forgotten gestures, subtle inflections of the hand and eye, carrying the echoes of an ancestral homeland across the ocean, passed down through generations. It's like a secret handshake, almost invisible to outsiders, but deeply meaningful to those who understood its language. Imagine the courage and creativity it took to maintain these fragments of culture under the constant threat of brutal punishment, to teach children these skills in secret, to find beauty and meaning in the scraps and discards of the plantation system. Imagine trying to explain to your overseer, who sees you only as chattel, the profound cosmological significance of the patterns you're weaving into your simple sleeping mat. No, sir, this isn't just for sleeping. It's a map of the entire universe, a connection to my ancestors. And no, you certainly can't have it to bed down your horse. Such conversations, if they ever dared to happen, probably didn't end well for the enslaved artisan. Yet these diasporic threads, though often thinner and woven from different materials, tell a powerful story. They speak of the tenacity of the human spirit, the portability of culture, and the enduring need to create beauty and meaning even in most oppressive of circumstances. The grand looms of Mombasa, Kongo might have fallen silent. The royal raffia workshops might have faded into memory, but the essential grammar of Kongo artistry, its rhythms, its geometries, its symbolic depth, found ways to survive, carried in the hearts and hands of its scattered children, re-emerging in unexpected places, a testament to a creativity that enslavement could not entirely extinguish. You've traced the poignant journey of Kongo's diasporic threads, witnessing how ancestral skills and aesthetic sensibilities were carried across the Atlantic, adapting and surviving in new and challenging lands. You've also seen how, back in the Kongo homeland, the craft of raffia weaving faced its own twilight as kingdoms fragmented and colonial pressures mounted. But the story, like the resilient raffia fiber itself, doesn't simply break. Instead, it twists, it adapts, and in many ways, it experiences a renaissance. Now, you're about to discover how modern artisans, both in Africa and around the globe, are re-entering these ancient Kongo textile arts, weaving new life into centuries-old traditions. After periods of decline in the overwhelming influx of industrially produced foreign textiles, the 20th and 21st centuries have seen a growing appreciation for handmade, indigenous crafts. So after centuries of being somewhat sidelined by imported European fabrics, and then nearly forgotten in the global consciousness, an interest in authentic African textile traditions, including those rooted in Kongo heritage, is blossoming anew. It's a bit like that amazing vintage band t-shirt you randomly found in the back of your closet, the one you wore constantly years ago. Suddenly, everyone thinks it's the coolest thing ever and wants to know where you got it. Raffia, and the artistic principles it embodies, is having a moment in the Congo River Basin itself. Across parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Republic of Congo, and Angola, you can still find communities and individual artisans who continue the practice of raffia weaving. The techniques might have evolved, the scale might be being different from the days of royal workshops, but the fundamental connection to the material and the ancestral knowledge persists. You might see weavers producing utilitarian items, like mats and baskets for local use, much as they always have. But you'll also encounter highly skilled artists creating breathtaking decorative panels, intricate ceremonial garments, or innovative sculptural forms from raffia, demonstrating a vibrant living tradition. They might use age-old patterns, those woven hieroglyphs we explored, or they might be inventing entirely new designs inspired by contemporary life, yet still executed with the meticulous care of their forebears. Beyond the immediate homeland, artists of the African diaspora, some with known or suspected Kongo ancestry, are also drawing inspiration from these rich textile traditions. They might not be using raffia palm fibers directly. Those are hard to come by in urban North America or Europe, but they are engaging with the aesthetic principles, the geometric abstraction, the rhythmic patterning, the deep symbolic meanings, the cut pile techniques, most famously seen in Kuba cloth, a close cousin and inheritor of many Kongo textile traditions, especially those of the Shua people. Dowry, Turu, Tete. You find painters, sculptors, mixed media artists, and fashion designers whose work resonates with the spirit of Kongo design, translating its visual language into new mediums and contexts. This brings us to a significant mainstream historical fact. In the post-colonial era, particularly from the latter half of the 20th century onwards, there has been a concerted effort across many African nations to revive, preserve, and promote indigenous arts and crafts. This movement recognizes these traditions not only for their immense cultural and historical value, but also as potential sources of sustainable economic empowerment for communities, cultural institutions, museums, and sometimes even government initiatives play a role in supporting artisans, helping them access markets, and ensuring that traditional skills are passed on to younger generations. The textile arts, being so visible and culturally rich, are often at the forefront of these efforts. The contemporary art world has also taken notice. Raffia Textiles from the Kongo region, particularly the aforementioned Kuba cloths, with their elaborate geometric designs and plush cut pile surfaces, are now prized by collectors and exhibited in major museums worldwide. This international recognition, while sometimes problematic if it leads to mere commodification, can also bring valuable attention and resources back to the communities where these traditions originate. You can find contemporary fashion designers today who get absolutely giddy over sourcing vintage Kuba raffia cloth, sometimes paying small fortunes for particularly fine or rare examples to hang on their studio walls as inspiration. Some even carefully deconstruct these old pieces, not out of disrespect, but as a form of deep study, textile archaeology, if you will, but make it fashion, darling, to learn the ancient weave structures and embroidery techniques firsthand. Of course, this intersection of ancient craft and modern markets is not without its complexities. Curators and cultural critics still debate whether the adaptation of traditional Congo-inspired textile designs for modern international markets. Think chic, Raffia handbags, high fashion garments incorporating raffia elements, or abstract wall hangings destined for minimalist art galleries, represents a vibrant evolution and a long overdue global recognition of the art form, or if it risks a certain dilution and commodification, potentially stripping the textiles of their original cultural context and deeper spiritual or social meanings when they're just seen as exotic decor. It's a delicate balance, navigating authenticity, innovation, and commercial appeal. A traditional Kongo weaver from the 15th century, who painstakingly crafted cloth imbued with cosmic meaning for their Mani Kongo, suddenly transported to a modern art fair or a Paris catwalk and seeing their ancestral patterns reinterpreted, they'd probably raise an eyebrow, perhaps be a little bewildered, but also, you'd hope, feel a spark of pride. Took you all long enough to appreciate sophisticated design. They might chuckle, and by the way, where's my complimentary glass of palm wine for this shindig? The journey of these textiles into the digital age is also fascinating. Trying to explain to your phone's voice assistant that you're specifically searching for authentic, contemporary Neo-Congo raffia art with pre-colonial symbolic resonance might just make its little algorithm throw up its virtual hands in despair. Some things, it seems, are still best discovered through more human connections, through seeking out the artisans, visiting the communities, or engaging with curators and aging with curators, scholars who have dedicated their lives to understanding these traditions. But the fact remains, the threads are alive. From remote villages in the Kongo Basin, where weavers continue to transform palm leaves into cloth, to bustling city studios, where contemporary artists reimagine ancient motifs, Raffia's story is still being woven. It's a narrative of incredible resilience, of artistic genius passed down through generations, and of a cultural legacy that refuses to be relegated to the museum archives. It's out there, evolving, breathing, and reminding us of the enduring power of human creativity to make something beautiful and meaningful from the gifts of the earth. You've journeyed through the remarkable renaissance of Congo-inspired textile art, witnessing how contemporary artisans are breathing new life into ancient traditions, their threads connecting a vibrant present to a storied past. It's a heartening sight, this resurgence of creativity. Yet, as with any deep dive into history, especially one that relies on interpreting material culture and fragmented accounts, the more you learn, the more you realize how much remains shrouded in mist, how many secrets still lie beneath the surface. Tonight we delve into some of these debated meanings, these half-forgotten uses, the intriguing lacunae that still exist within the rich history of Kongo Raffia Textiles. For all the scholarship, the careful analysis of patterns and techniques, there are aspects of these textiles that continue to elude our full understanding. Meanings shift over time, contexts are lost, and the silent language of symbols can become muted when the original speakers are long gone. It's like trying to understand your cat's most profound motivations. You can observe its behavior, you can make educated guesses, but you'll never truly know with absolute certainty why it insists on methodically knocking every single pen off your desk, or what that particularly abstract squiggle on an ancient piece of cloth truly signified to its weaver and its original audience. Take, for example, some of the intricate geometric patterns we've touched upon, those lozenges, chevrons, and interlaces that form the vocabulary of Congo-woven hieroglyphs. While we have general interpretations for many of them, often linking them to broader Central African cosmological ideas, like the Kenge cross, or to natural phenomena, the precise meaning of a specific motif in a particular cloth from a particular region, at a particular point in time can be fiercely debated by scholars. Was that specific interlace pattern a symbol of royal lineage, a representation of a specific proverb, or an abstract map of local river systems? Without more direct cultural transmission or detailed contemporary indigenous explanations for every single design variation, we are often left to careful comparison, contextual inference, and sometimes inspired guesswork. This challenge is compounded by a mainstream historical fact we must always keep in mind. Most of the early written accounts of the Kongo kingdom, while invaluable sources, were penned by European outsiders, missionaries, traders, colonial officials. These observers, no matter how diligent some might have been, viewed Kongo society through the lens of their own cultural backgrounds, religious beliefs, and often their political or economic agendas. They might have misunderstood, misinterpreted, or simply overlooked the deeper nuances of what they were seeing, including the full significance of textiles. What a missionary saw as mere pagan decoration might have been, to the Kongo wearer, a profound statement about their place in the cosmos, or their connection to their ancestors. Ethnolinguists and art historians still passionately argue, for instance, whether some of the more complex geometric motifs found in Kongo Raffia Textiles, and particularly in related Kuba art, represent a form of proto-writing or a sophisticated pictographic system that went beyond general symbolism. Could these patterns have encoded specific historical narratives, genealogies, or other mnemonic data in a way that we can no longer fully decipher? The idea is tantalizing, a lost readable history woven into cloth, but concrete proof remains elusive, making it a fertile ground for scholarly debate. Some of these academic discussions about a single zigzag pattern can get more intense than a royal succession crisis. I tell you, it represents the primordial serpent coiling around the world tree. Another scholar might retort, nonsense. It's clearly a stylized representation of cassava cultivation patterns. Perhaps it's time to pass around the virtual palm wine, folks, and agree to disagree respectfully. Then there are the forgotten uses or lost techniques. Were there specific types of raffia cloth, perhaps for highly specialized rituals or for particular social roles, that have entirely disappeared from the historical record and from contemporary practice? Archaeological finds are rare for textiles in tropical climates, but occasionally a fragment preserved in a dry cave or as part of a funerary bundle might hint at weaving techniques or fiber preparations that are no longer known. The full spectrum of how raffia was integrated into every facet of Kongo life might have subtleties we can now only guess at. And this brings us to a quirky, more speculative bit. There are intriguing, though largely unconfirmed, suggestions in some ethnographic notes or whispered oral traditions that certain raffia textiles were used in highly specialized, almost alchemical ways. Imagine, if you will, specific weaves being used as incredibly fine filters in the preparation of potent herbal medicines. The structure of the cloth itself believed to contribute to the efficacy of the remedy, or perhaps certain combinations of patterns and dyes in a raffia amulet were believed to naturally repel specific unwanted spiritual influences, a kind of ancient metaphysical bug spray, but fashioned from fabric. Good luck finding Hein, confirmed in a peer-reviewed historical monograph. But it certainly sparks the imagination about the depth of Kongo botanical and spiritual knowledge. The very act of trying to unlock all the secrets of these ancient textiles with our modern analytical tools and contemporary mindsets can sometimes feel like trying to open an intricately carved Kongo puzzle box with a crowbar. You might eventually get it open. You might be able to describe its components, but you'll almost certainly miss the elegant ingenuity of its original mechanism and the true intention behind its design. These mysteries, however, are not a cause for frustration, but rather for a deeper appreciation. They remind us that cultures are complex, that meaning is layered, and that our understanding is always a work in progress. In fact, these very ambiguities and debated interpretations can fuel contemporary artistic exploration, as seen in Raffia's Renaissance today. Artists might seize upon a partially understood symbol or a forgotten technique as a starting point for entirely new creative journeys, engaging in dialogue with the past that acknowledges both what is known and what remains tantalizingly out of reach. The Atlantic breezes that carried Kongo people and their traditions across the ocean also inadvertently carried fragments of these mysteries, some of which might find new interpretations or echoes in diasporic artistic expressions. So, as you contemplate these woven legacies, embrace the uncertainties. Let the unknown aspects deepen your sense of wonder. The secret still held within the ancient fibers, the debated meanings, and the forgotten uses all contribute to the enduring allure of Kongo Raffia Textiles, making them not just historical artifacts, but living puzzles that continue to engage our intellect and our imagination. You've journeyed far tonight, from the verdant cradle of the Kongo, where the raffia palm first whispered its potential, all the way through the rise of a kingdom, the complexities of its culture, the pain of its decline, the scattering of its seeds, and the inspiring rebirth of its ancient arts. You've seen humble palm fibers transformed into threads of royalty, into a unique form of currency, into sacred maps of the cosmos, and into silent banners of identity. It's been quite the odyssey, and the humble raffia thread itself has been our constant guide, weaving through centuries of human experience. Now, as our journey nears its close, we pause to reflect on the eternal echoes of these remarkable Kongo textiles, a legacy woven into the very fabric of time itself. What endures from this intricate history? First and foremost, it's the recognition of an immense cultural heritage. These raffia textiles are not mere artifacts. They are living documents, tangible expressions of Kongo ingenuity, philosophy, and social organization. They represent a sophisticated artistic tradition that flourished for centuries, embodying a unique worldview and a profound understanding of material transformation. For people of Kongo descent, both in Africa and in the diaspora, these traditions can be powerful sources of identity, pride, and connection to ancestral roots. Those diasporic threads, carried in memory and skill, have, as we've seen, subtly but significantly influenced the cultural landscapes of the Americas. Indeed, a vital mainstream historical fact is that Kongo-derived cultural elements, its artistic principles of abstraction, improvisation, and rhythmic repetition so visible in textile work, alongside its music, dance, and spiritual frameworks, have had a profound, though often unacknowledged, influence on global culture, particularly in shaping the vibrant cultures of the African diaspora in the Americas. The artistic influence continues to resonate today, as seen in Raffia's contemporary Renaissance. Intricate patterns, the tactile richness, the sheer inventiveness of Kongo weavers have inspired generations of artists, designers, and creators far beyond the Kongo River basin, whether it's a fashion designer drawing on traditional motifs, an interior decorator incorporating raffia textures, or a contemporary artist reinterpreting ancient symbols. The aesthetic power of these textiles continues to captivate and stimulate new forms of creativity. Sitting there somewhere in the Kongo basin, fanning its fronds with a rather smug expression, as if to say, indeed, I always knew my leaves were destined for greatness. You humans just took a while to fully appreciate my astonishing versatility. Perhaps the most profound lessons from the loom is about resilience. Think of the immense pressures these traditions faced: the transatlantic slave trade, colonial domination, economic upheaval, the influx of foreign goods, and the suppression of indigenous cultures. And yet, the knowledge of how to work with raffia, the aesthetic preferences, the symbolic meanings, they persisted, they adapted, they found new ways to express themselves, both in the homeland and in distant lands. It's a powerful testament to the tenacity of human culture, the deep-seated need to create beauty and meaning, and the enduring importance of cultural memory. Cultural historians and museologists, by the way, continue to debate the most ethical and effective ways to conserve, exhibit, and, where appropriate, repatriate historically significant African textiles like those from the Kongo. This is a critical ongoing conversation. How do we balance the need for preservation with the reality of living traditions? How do we ensure that these objects, often collected under colonial circumstances, tell their stories with respect and accuracy, acknowledging both their origins and their complex historical journeys through time and across continents? It's about ensuring these echoes from the past are heard clearly and honorably. And here's a final quirky, yet rather lovely, thought for you. There's a contemporary saying that circulates among some textile artists who choose to work with natural fibers and traditional methods. The old threads know the way. It speaks to an almost intuitive guidance, a sense of connection that seems to arise from the tactile engagement with ancient materials and time-honored techniques, as if the collective memory and accumulated wisdom of all those past weavers are somehow whispering through your own fingers as you work. Perhaps the spirit of Kongo raffia, with all its history and artistry, is still actively teaching us, guiding our hands, and inspiring our hearts, if we only take the time to listen to its subtle rustlings. So after all this exploration of intricate weaves, symbolic hieroglyphs, cosmic maps, and resilient threads, if you still think a simple plait is just a placemat, well, we might need to have another very long, very sleepy chat sometime, preferably over some ethically sourced and perhaps even cosmically aligned palm wine. Because what you've seen tonight is that even the most seemingly humble materials in the hands of skilled and thoughtful people can become carriers of immense cultural weight, profound beauty, and enduring historical echoes. Trying to sum up the entire legacy of Kongo raffia in one final, sweeping statement is like trying to neatly fold an infinitely large, incredibly patterned celestial bedsheet that's been embroidered with the entire history of human creativity. You simply do your best, smooth out a few cosmic wrinkles, and hope you've conveyed even a fraction of its magnificent, sprawling story. The eternal echoes of raffia will continue to resonate, carried on the wind, in museum collections, in contemporary art, and in the quiet pride of communities who keep these traditions alive, ensuring that the whispers of the palm are never truly silenced. And so, as the images of these remarkable textiles begin to soften in your mind, like the fine, worn raffia cloth that once cradled a newborn or shrouded an honored ancestor, let the complexity and the beauty of this long history settle gently around you. The journey from a single palm frond to a symbol of royalty, a unit of currency, a map of the universe, and a testament to unbreakable human spirit is a profound one, a story woven with patience, skill, and deep meaning. The threads of this narrative, much like the raffia fibers themselves, have twisted and turned, faced sun and storm, yet have held together, connecting past to present, Africa to its diaspora, and art to the very essence of human experience. The quiet dignity of the weavers, the wisdom embedded in their ancient patterns, and the incredible resilience of their craft inspire a sense of peace and wonder as you drift further into your own dreams. The looms be quiet for the night, but the stories they've told continue to resonate, a soft, enduring hum beneath the surface of the world.